fellas, on today's video we are gonna wrap up the Exsanguinate Hierophant with some endgame stuff. The character has managed to beat the first Sirus, Maven and a couple of other things alongside plenty of ultimatum content. However, success has come with a price. There were some rather important changes from the previous video, some in the gear department, but the bulk comes in the skill tree. This is because I've removed the entire shadow area nodes and instead invested in cluster jewels. With all honesty, I tried to avoid these clusters at all costs, but I quickly came to the conclusion that I had exhausted all DPS options in the shadow area, while the clusters themselves will offer even more damage than that side of the tree, so I decided to commit and fortunately the results are more than positive. We're also going to support the DPS of the character through Corrupting Fever, mostly because I had open sockets in the character and it made little sense to not use this damage over time skill as a small DPS backup. It's not terribly mandatory, but it does give us a bit of damage that is hard to skip on. At the same time, thanks to the 3 changes, I was able to spec into some aura mana reservation reductions, in order to cram aspect of the spider into the build. You know, for some damage and also slowing enemies a bit, which does come in handy especially in the endgame department. Having said that, while I did recommend using Vaal Righteous Fire in the previous video, I will admit that I barely used that skill. The health penalty is too high now, and since we are sacrificing health to cast all of our skills, Vaal Righteous Fire is not looking too attractive nowadays, so feel free to drop it altogether. But it's still here if you wanna go ahead and proc it, if an enemy is not looking at you. But yeah, this is one hell of a league starter, a lot of fun to play, smooth and most importantly, simple. Granted, not super cheap especially after the changes I did, but relatively simple to get a grasp on. Anyways, before we move on to the important stuff, hey, if you are new around here, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, otherwise a like and a comment are always appreciated. So now let's conclude the magical adventures of the Squirting Boomer. It never stops sounding wrong, does it? Alright everyone, first thing is the gear, as always. Not too many changes, but those that happened are very important to consider. The body armor is now a Warlord influenced astral plate. I achieved this by slamming a Warlord Exalt on the armor that I already had. And I did this so that I could get the additional active gem level alongside the Sacred Strength gem level from Faceted Fossils. However, this implies having to recraft it, but luckily I hit the good mods in a few tries. Obviously, more life and resistances will be optimal, but I can live with the rolls on mine. The helmet, the crown of the inward eye, is now enchanted with exsanguinate damage, but exsanguinate duration is also top tier, especially when attempting to stack the skill 3 times for optimal DPS. The amulet is the same one as the previous video, but I've crammed aspect of the spider into it. I recommend doing the same, slamming the aspect into any piece of gear with an open suffix, for damage and slowing down enemies. I also changed the anoint into growth and decay since we are no longer spec'd into the shadow area. One of the rings now has the Leo prefix increased damage as a permanent mod thanks to the new unveiling system, alongside life, resistances and a crafted minimum frenzy charge. The other ring was a super lucky find in an ultimatum, a ring with vulnerability on hit as the implicit, which I recrafted by spamming chaos until I got life and resistances. Also more damage bench crafted into it. And in the belt, one of the Abyss jewels lost resistances but gained dexterity and a bit more damage over time while holding a shield. Again, this is because we are not in the shadow area anymore and we require like 112 dexterity to use everything the build requires. But from there on out, everything remains the same. You can check the rest of the gear in the PoE, that is, if Pastebin stopped being a poo-poo like in the previous video. And before we move on to the skill tree, 2 things. First, chaos resistance is mandatory nowadays. I can't be the only one who tells you this. The game is doing a great job of reminding you. So the closer to capped chaos res that you can get, the better. Do not skip on it. And the second thing is, yes, a lot of the gear got expensive for a league starter. The thing is, it is worth going for a bit more investment, especially if you intend on fighting endgame baddies. You can play around with the previous version, but these upgrades are definitely something that you'll want to achieve eventually. But yeah, let us talk about the skill tree now. This is now a level 95 Hierophant, but 94 should be doable if you get an Enlightened gem. You'll see what I mean in a bit. We are still not befriending any bandits, and for pantheons, Solaris or Lunaris are the major goddesses that you can swap around and Shakari as the lesser one. The Ascendancy saw no changes, but like I said in the last video, you can avoid the Divine Guidance and spec into Pursuit of Faith instead, to spam your decoy totem faster. Now for the actual changes, we've unspec'd from the shadow area as I keep saying, but we also removed some nodes in the witch area. namely the power charge and spell damage while holding a shield. And we are using the bulk of those nodes in different areas. First thing, we need to be stun immune, especially in the flustercocks that are ultimatums. It makes little sense to not be stun immune, so we are grabbing Unwavering Stance, but we still want the rest of the nodes in this area, as in the life, Jewel Socket, and damage when using life sapping skills. Next, we are gonna invest into some duration. Again, we gotta build those exsanguinate stacks, and duration will be the easiest way to do so. Unfortunately, this means spending 5 points into some duration nodes near the Zion area. The next change is the cluster jewel setup. We need a large cluster jewel with 8 passives at most, with exploit weakness, master the fundamentals and force multiplier. We are taking 7 points in this jewel. The other 2 medium cluster jewels need Blood Artist as a mandatory node. They give a hefty chunk of damage just by sacrificing some health, which we are doing 90% of the time. Now optimally with like another notable that gives us fist damage over time multiplier, and in my case I've got one of these cluster jewels that gives me Phlebotomist. While yes, this requires a recent crit to get the damage increase, we'll be using a Void Sphere linked to crit chance support to achieve this relatively often, while at the same time we've got some crit chance and power charges which should help us keep this buff rather frequently. Finally, we spec into some dexterity, movement and cast speed in the Templar start, and at the same time some life and chaos resistance and aura reservation nodes in the Templar area. You can spend 3 points in this wheel if you get an Enlightened 3 or higher to link your auras with, which should allow you to cap the build at 94, but that is up to you. Everything else remains the same. The jewels themselves all have increased maximum life, physical damage over time multiplier and either other damage stuff like spell damage, generic damage, damage over time or cast speed or crit chance, you know, stuff that helps us a bit. But yeah, that is it for the skill tree, so now let us wrap this one with the gem setup. In the body armor, Exsanguinate linked to control destruction, empower, swift affliction, brutality and efficacy. We swap Swift Affliction for mapping and swap back for single target. Empower is now level 4, unlike the previous video. This is going to be a bit of an expensive upgrade, but it is worth in the long run, so try to get it as soon as possible. If you can use Awakened Gems, don't sleep on those either. More damage is always good. In the helmet, Corrupting Fever linked to Swift Affliction, Brutality and Efficacy. At 10 stacks it does like 500k damage over time, which is a bit low, but since it's quote-unquote free damage, might as well, right? In the weapon, Void Sphere linked to increased crits and efficacy. We use this to suck enemies during ultimatums. Since it's linked to increased crits and with the power charges, we proc Phlebotomist rather often whenever this is up, but it's only used that way if you got Phlebotomist on one of your medium cluster jewels. In the boots we socket the auras, Divergent Pride, War Banner and Herald of Purity. In the gloves, Decoy Totem and a Flame Dash, linked to Life Tap and Second Wind. And finally, Baal Righteous Fire, but only if you want to use it. And with all of that said, that is pretty much it for this magical League starter adventure. A pretty fun one, very smooth, with a ton of room to continuously upgrade. Granted, beyond the point I end up this character, upgrades imply Awakener slamming gloves, amulet, shield, body, etc. So it is a lot more expensive than what I did, but to those of you who like min-maxing, hey, it might not be super out of place to go that route. All in all, I am glad that I went with this to begin Ultimatum. It helped greatly getting a hang of the League mechanic, while also farming its way to constantly improve, which is a nice change of pace actually. And with all of that said, I'll leave you with a flawless Maven fight. It wasn't my first fight and it's definitely not the fastest fight, but it went relatively smooth, so I think that is good enough, especially for a League starter. Thank you so much for watching tonight's video, and if you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe, rate and comment. Take care, have a nice start to your week, and be sure to tune in next time when we use an Elementalist for anything and everything but elemental damage. Peace out.
This will not be a